Here we go again. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I can see a whole pile of people have jumped in, so we've got enough to get started straight away. No need to hang around and wait for others to trickle in. Today, in the latest in our webinar series, we're going to be talking about the power of visual feedback and how leveraging session replays can help with our bug tracking issues. I'm excited to talk about this one. I know bug tracking is a continuous bugbear, excuse the pun, for many people. And so having a way that we can simply tackle that and make our lives a little easier has got to be a win for everybody. So thanks again for joining us for this one. I'm excited to talk to you about it along with my colleague Dan, who I'll introduce in a moment. Before we do a little bit of housekeeping, you'll see on your screens you've got an option to ask Q&A. So if you drop those in there, you won't be able to see them initially, but we're going to jump into those at the back end of the session. We promised to keep it to around the half hour that was promised so that we can get everybody on with their day in the best and prompt manner that we possibly can. So don't wait till the end. Throw them in there as you go along. Anything that springs to mind, we'll do our best to answer them. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague, Daniel Ray. Dan, lovely to have you on board again for our latest webinar installment for the folks here. Dan's a customer success manager here at Userback. You can see that on the slide. He's been with us for a number of years. Dan, great to have you again. I'm excited to hear what you've got to say.
Thanks, Matt. Really excited to be talking about the visual aspects of Userback today. Really just focusing on the screenshots, video recordings, they're all good, but we can absolutely elevate that further and tie some of the more higher context features to build a much bigger picture. We're going to solve those bugs faster, and we're going to be able to communicate with our customers quicker about that resolution as well. So really excited to talk about the elevated feedback process with a session replay.
Yep, I think anytime we can get a little bit better at something without taking a lot of time, a lot of money, or a lot of manpower, it's got to be a win for all of us. So I'm excited to hear more about it. Shall we dive into it? Let's talk about it.
Sounds good. Firstly, wanted to cover off some of the pain and the challenges and really why we've created session replay with user feedback. So some of those more traditional feedback flows, manual reports, basic screenshots, they're really good. Userback does provide a visual feedback tool with screenshots and video recording as well. Those are really powerful. The only challenge with them is there's still context not being provided, and that's what we're going to focus on today, is that elevated context. So those traditional feedback challenges around manual reports, we just want a little bit more detail to provide that thorough bug analysis. So that's the first challenge, is just basic reports with screenshots. The second challenge is the replication side, and any product team member or anyone who's ever been part of solving bugs, even from the support side, the customer service side, all the way through to development. You'll all know the huge challenge it can be to replicate a bug. We might have an error. We might have all of this extra information. We might even have, the element ID, something really specific that would usually help you replicate that bug. But sometimes you just need to see it in action, and that's what we're going to take a look at shortly, is just being able to clearly and obviously replicate these bugs quickly that your users and your customers have experienced.
Yep, brilliant. I think it's always surprising me how often we hear about internal teams using manual screenshots, for example, and trying to attach to email and firing those around inside organizations to try and manage bug tracking through Q&A and internal testing stages. And so what we're going to show here, I think, is a major step forward in that. And I heard the expression once that horses hate stories about unicorns. So if you're doing that, we don't want to say you're doing that wrong, but there's an opportunity to get a little bit better in this, right? Because technology certainly moved on since the spreadsheets, emails, and manual screenshot days. All right.
That's it. Beautifully summarized. There was actually one extra point, is those communication gaps. So that last pain point. Sorry, Matt, to drag you back. The one core benefit that I actually found when implementing something like session replay is the lack of needing to go back to ask follow-up questions. I didn't realize this would be a huge impact, but nothing beats being able to get a bug report from a user and just tell them it's fixed. And that's what this is going to enable you to do. So we're reducing those communication gaps, and we're further speeding up that feedback loop. And all around, it's going to be a much nicer experience. It's going to lower the time spent from your devs. Everybody's happy.
Yeah, if you go out and take a survey of your devs and ask them who likes going back and forth with their users once they submit a bug that they're unsure about, it's going to be 100-0, right? Yeah, you're not going to find many people that like going back and forth.
That's
so
it.
Communication gaps are a massive point.
I think it's a bold assumption that you're going to get them to send an email as well. So I think
I would suggest that's the case.
So the solution we have, session replay. It's a really powerful feature. It's going to give you a video-like action replay of what just happened. Anyone who's played a game or watched any live sports, it's an action replay. You're going to see exactly what happened right up until that user submitted that feedback. So one of the core benefits is going to be those real-time visual insights. You're going to see every little interaction on the page. You're going to get an idea of exactly what happened in the form of a video. That next core benefit, that's going to be around accurate bug identification. So around the replication pane that we spoke about before, it's going to help you easily identify that bug and then replicate it so you can get it solved. But identifying, that's the first step, right? Making sure that it is actually a bug and understanding what that bug is. User-centric side, this is a part that I like talking about. As you can see there, it offers that authentic view from the user's perspective. As I said, it is an action replay of what that user did, exactly what they saw. It's an exact replication of that. But again, highlighting that it's that authentic view from their perspective. It's going to enable you to enhance your understanding and the empathy needed to get that bug solved. All these little components are going to influence your bug solving and your bug management and tracking as well. So it all comes together. That last pain point that we hit, communication, this is just talking about that point again, efficient communication. This is going to mean that your comments being provided to the team, communication detail isn't going to be lost. You're really going to be able to provide a clear picture to that user. You're not to that team member. You're not explaining what happened. You can pass a visual representation as a fact, and they have that trust off the bat, and it's going to ensure that that communication is nice and tight. So you'll just pass that session replay across with the feedback. They'll be able to understand it and get it solved. Again, you're not going back to the user asking a million questions. Your team members are not going to go back to you asking for further clarifications on things they haven't understood. Super clear, accurate identification, all a part of session replay.
Good points, one and all there, I reckon, Dan. I think just worth noting that session replays, it's not exclusive to the internal teams as well, right? You can be using tools like Userback for external users, your user base themselves to be reporting bugs to help with your software accuracy. And more often than not, perhaps, they're going to be non-technical users, right? If you're going through a Q&A phase, maybe you've got technical users doing that and they're able to more easily articulate what was going on. But very often, I know when I've submitted a bug, I've got no technical background, to deep dive into the what and the why there. So, this looks like a tool and a technique that people can easily implement to turn non-technical users into technical submissions, right? Which is it's gonna help everyone.
Beautifully said. Exactly right. I think this might be a good opportunity to jump in and get a real life example of what this looks like. So I'll go ahead. Perfect. I'll go ahead and share my screen. For anyone that's watched our webinar series before, this is our demo app that we've got. It's really basic, but it is meant to be a representation of perhaps some of the apps and websites that you've developed and where you might install Userback. So let's say one of your users is navigating around your app. They're cruising around the dashboard, they're looking at insights, and they come across a specific feature they'd like to use. So I want to go ahead and generate a report. So once I click that generate a report button, immediately what's going to appear is an error. So this is a really common use case where someone's just utilizing the product, they'll get an error, It's very nondescript. It just says an error occurred. We're going to provide those users a way to easily provide that error to you. So what I'm going to do here is just enter a little bit of context. Again, there's not much. And what you are seeing here is the Userback widget and the Userback feedback tool. It's already identified me as a user using user identification. All I needed to do was actually provide a short description. And if helpful, you can also provide a screenshot as well. So this visual representation and the text is really good. But what I'm about to show you, the additional context that's being added into the background, that's really what we're talking about here today. So again, just going through the basic screenshot annotation tool feature with as I raise this bug, then I click submit, and that's all done. So again, that bug report, that error appeared. I then click contact. I then provided a very short description. I then added an annotated screenshot and sent it across. With that text alone and that screenshot, it's likely not going to be enough because, again, I'll just highlight that screenshot here. Here it is. I've got my error. Reach out to us for more help. So even from a development perspective, I can see that there's a problem, but I don't really know what's actually happening in the background. That's where session replay comes in, where it's going to attach that action replay to each piece of feedback that comes in, as long as you've enabled it, of course. So what I'll do here is I'll just open the session replay up in a much bigger window. I can enable my console logs and event tracking. I didn't mention this, but this is all being collected in the background. I did talk about higher context, but I wasn't really specific about what that was. So we are tracking events as the user engages with them on the page, and it's going to provide them in a running timeline. So again, like a video, as I spoke about before. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to expose anything that's been written to the console. So errors, warnings, info, and you can start to see there's something going on here. There's a lot of errors and logs being written off to the left-hand side. So what I can do is I can go ahead and watch that action replay right now. So you can see my cursor moving around the screen. Again, you're seeing exactly what this user did right up until they submitted it. If there's any rage clicks or any actions or movements that shows me that the user is frustrated, then obviously I can respond to that as well. The key thing is here, though, is that when that error occurred, when they went to generate a report. So what we can do is potentially go to the most corresponding error that we can find, and I can actually click go to and jump to that specific point in the timeline. So I can click go to, again, it jumps to the 6-minute mark, and then I can watch a complete replay of that bug as it's occurring. So I don't just have that visual aspect of a screenshot, I've got that video-like replay, a carbon copy replication of what just happened, and then I've got the event and the console context to help build that really big picture. Again, we're going to be left with the ability to either triage or solve this bug on the spot, or basically action it, because that's one of the challenges we spoke about before, is not getting enough context to be able to action it. So now that I've gone ahead and I've understood the bug, I can then go ahead and minimize it. I can add my comments. I can send it off to an integration like Azure DevOps or Jira, or I can just go ahead and provide the resolution like I am now. Please log out and log back in. Thanks. Okay, I'll send that off to the user. That's now solved. So we've got their feedback. We understood what the error was. We marked it as solved, gave them the solution, and we're all done and dusted. So that should really provide that visual representation of session replay and some of the benefits and how that might look within your own app. But again, as Matt mentioned before, if you have any questions, I do want you to populate them in the chat as we work through this chat.
I think that's a good demonstration, Dan. I think that's a long way from manual screenshots and emails and spreadsheets that we were talking about a little bit earlier, right? And if you could see the session info there, you know, being able to populate resolutions and operating systems and DPI and the like gives you a great starting point. And when you combine that with user action and you know, the video replay and the greater context through bug tracking and the console logs there, it gives you a really robust start to it, right? And probably what we didn't touch on just there was the ability to jump, is such a time saver for people. If you can imagine getting 10 of these at half an hour, do we want to be sitting through trying to scrape through 30 minutes worth of video every time they come through? Ultimately, people are just going to stop watching them, right? So having the ability to jump straight in and spend 5 minutes rather than 45 minutes trying to find that issue is a massive time saver, right? And can save hours every week and tens of hours every month, which, produces a pretty good ROI when you look at the cost of development these days.
That's perfect. And there was actually something else that I thought of. It really relates to the trust when your users are providing feedback to you. Obviously we treat our users with trust and respect, but there are some cases where they're going to do their best to explain the bug to you, and it's going to be so far off the mark that it could potentially lead you down the wrong path. So originally we were talking about bug replication, but I don't even know what to call this, but fallacy bug investigation, where you're sort of looking at a bug report from the wrong angle, from the wrong detail. This has solved this for me at Userback. We've got some really technical users at Userback, and they really attempt to provide the solution as they're raising the bug. And sometimes just being able to see it as it occurs, usually it's not as complex as what they're talking about. Sometimes it's just as simple as refreshing the page, something even the most technical people will forget about. So again, that trust aspect is really important, but we no longer have to rely on their context. We can further bolster it with a carbon copy of what just happened, again, with a session replay.
No red herrings. That can be the tagline for it.
Oh, perfect.
We're away. I love it. Okay. That's a good point. All right. So good demo. Hopefully in just 5 minutes there, we were able to see sort of the power of that in the upfront context, as well as the efficiencies that we gain, which is awesome. Thanks for that, Dan. So that's taking us towards the back end of this, right? We promised that we would try and keep it short and sweet for everybody and keep it within the half an hour that we advertised. But we'll jump into the Q&A here, and we'll see what questions folks have got for us. I saw a few pop in before, so we can jump straight into those, Dan. I'll fire them off, and you can do your best to answer these for the folks. Okay, so how does user feedback, how does Userback Session Replay handle user privacy?
This was one of the points that I wanted to talk about a little bit earlier, but I thought, it might pop up as a question, and it did. So just in regards to user privacy, we've got a whole dedicated page within project settings. It does relate to not just session replays, but you will see the specific components that do. So right at the top, you've got the ability to ignore user location. So again, we first respect you by not forcing you to identify your users or include any identifying information. We're going to strip out IP addresses, and really any of the location stuff is all going to be tagged as unknown. So it'd really be up to you by not collecting names and emails. If you didn't want to, you'll need to turn off those fields. But any metadata hidden in the background that could relate to compromising your user's privacy or compliance with GDPR, we can switch that off inside the project settings. Now, in regards to the session recordings themselves or session replay, this is a really cool feature. You can go ahead and you can add classes and IDs and even input types to block, ignore, or mask. So there's 3 types of basically privacy-based features for blurring and blocking information display inside a session replay. So it's really about first investigating what needs to be made private and what's important to remain hidden to respect users' privacy and, again, support your compliance with any privacy associations you're looking to adhere to. So the first thing I would do is talk to my developers or my product team about how I can get the IDs and the classes to have them blocked, or I could then provide this class to my development team to then block out those IDs. So there's a small technical aspect involved, but we do have the ability to ensure that these session replays are absolutely respectful of privacy.
Good question and good answer, Dan. And then in terms of Userback storing these two, right, we take security and privacy seriously. So GDPR compliance and the SOC compliance and those types of practices.
That's it.
Are something that we preach here and deliver on as well. So secure all the way through, which is great. The next question, Dan, how long are sessions stored for in Userback?
So sessions are stored indefinitely for however long you have a Userback subscription. So as you collect user feedback from your users, each session replay will be attached to those feedback. So again, we provide a platform that'll store those indefinitely. You can come back to refer to them at any point, but it's completely up to you how long they're stored for. We don't put any time limits on them.
Which is a bonus, right? Hopefully there aren't too many people here with web apps and websites that have, an overwhelming flood of bugs being reported, but knowing that you don't have to get to them within 7 days or so, makes a big difference in terms of prioritization and just how easy it is for people to get through the work.
Exactly.
Okay, here's another one. Is error tracking and logging an additional step I have to work through with my dev? Sounds like it's coming from maybe a product manager there that's pondering how to work best with his team.
Yeah, that's actually a really, really good question. This is something that I had asked when I was looking at session replay for the first time. So the only thing to consider and maximizing the capture of any logs or errors or warnings is to ensure that Userback is one of the first libraries loaded for your page. So right now, the recommended way is to insert the Userback script just before the closing body tag. The solution is to include that in the head, so to make sure that it is being declared at the right time before any errors can be before any errors are surfaced. So how do you do that? We have multiple installation guides. We would just provide or recommend that you look at one of our advanced installation guides. Any of them would be perfect for you. I think it's just about finding the right one. So the information to provide your devs, it's just the installation article, but we can provide more detail about that. My email is going to be shown at the very end. So if you personally would like to reach out and need some assistance, I'd be more than happy to help.
All right. Good stuff. We'll touch on that email and how people can get in contact with you in just a moment, because I've got one more question for you here.
No problem.
Providing no more come through in the interim. So does Session Replay work with Userback integrations?
It does. It does. So when you connect an integration with Userback, you'll be able to send feedback directly to a messaging tool or a notification tool, a project or development tool like Jira or Azure DevOps. Essentially, when you do send this feedback across, the session replay is going to be included as a link. So you'll have all the context about the feedback itself, who it was from, the session data, the screenshot as an attachment. You'll see the session replay link down the bottom of the report, and you can just click it. It'll take you back into Userback and show you that session replay. So yeah, absolutely. It does come through with all of the integrations.
Easy to distribute that information amongst teams. Love that. All right. I don't have any others coming through, Dan. So let's press on. Let's jump into that final slide of ours. If you want to tab back into the slide deck.
Thanks for the reminder.
No problem at all. And we can wrap things up here. So thank you everybody for joining us. Dan mentioned that his email would be on the final slide, and so here it is. If you're interested in learning more about the session replay, you can jump straight onto userback.io. Check out the session replay tool on our features page. You can check out our support docs and our developer docs that are also on that website in the footer. If you want to get down and dirty with it, you can jump straight into a free trial, no credit card needed there, and you can get hands-on with that to explore it yourself. If there's any questions, Daniel Ray's email is on the slide in front of us, as I mentioned. And the final thing to say is that keep an eye on your email, because we'll be sharing the presentation after this webinar is concluded. So you can watch this back, grab any details, and if you think of anything between now and then, you'll have Daniel's email and you can reach out at any time. So with that being said, thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Matthew Kier. I'm joined by Dan, and that's it from us. So thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye for now. See you, Dan.